Imagine this: the person you confide in, laugh with, and trust with your deepest secrets is secretly plotting your demise. Not a stranger, not an enemy, but someone you'd never suspect. What would you do if the danger wasn't lurking in the shadows, but sitting right beside you? Welcome to Crime Chronicles, where we peel back the facade of ordinary lives to expose chilling tales of betrayal, deceit, and dark secrets hidden in plain sight. These aren't just stories, they're real accounts of trust twisted into treachery, of lives shattered by the very people meant to protect them. If you're fascinated by the terrifying truths that hide behind perfect smiles and picture-perfect lives, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Michael and Claire Thompson seemed like the couple everyone envied. Michael, a brilliant architect with a reputation for designing breathtaking homes, was charismatic, kind, and successful. His clients admired his creativity, his peers respected his meticulous attention to detail, and his friends saw him as the man who had it all: a thriving career and a beautiful wife. Claire, with her striking beauty and effortless charm, ran a popular boutique that catered to high-end clients. She had a knack for fashion, curating styles that made headlines in local magazines. Their life appeared picture-perfect: elegant parties hosted in their designer home, spontaneous weekend getaways to exotic destinations, and romantic anniversaries celebrated with grand gestures that left their social circle swooning. But perfection often masks imperfections. Behind the glossy photos and curated social media posts, Claire felt suffocated. The spark that once defined their relationship had fizzled into a monotonous routine. Their conversations revolved around grocery lists, client meetings, and the next charity gala. The passion that once made her heart race had been replaced by polite smiles and obligatory date nights. She craved excitement, danger, and passion, things Michael no longer provided. His world was structured, predictable, and safe. Claire, however, was drowning in the safety net, desperate for a taste of the unknown. And then she met Adam. Adam was everything Michael wasn't: rugged, unpredictable, and thrilling. Their paths crossed by chance in a downtown cafe, the kind with dim lighting and the lingering aroma of roasted coffee beans. Claire had spilled her drink, and Adam, sitting nearby, offered a napkin with a crooked smile and an easy charm. Their chemistry was instant, electric, the kind that made Claire's heart pound in a way she hadn't felt in years. Their affair began as a reckless escape. Clandestine meetings in secluded hotel rooms, stolen glances at crowded events, and secret text messages sent under the table during dinners with Michael. With Adam, Claire felt alive. His unpredictability was intoxicating: late-night drives with no destination, whispered confessions under moonlight, and the thrill of almost getting caught. It was dangerous, and that danger was addictive. But secrets have a way of unraveling, no matter how tightly they are woven. Michael was not oblivious. He noticed the changes, like the distant stares, the sudden, unexplained absences, the forced laughter that didn't quite reach Claire's eyes. At first he dismissed it as stress, convincing himself that every marriage went through rough patches. But suspicion grew, gnawing at the edges of his mind until he couldn't ignore it anymore. What started as stolen kisses and whispered secrets slowly twisted into something darker. Adam had always been a master of getting what he wanted. The charm, the confidence, the way he could talk to anyone and make them feel like they were the only person in the room. It was all part of his arsenal. But with Claire it was different. She was married, tied to Michael, a man who in Adam's eyes had everything he lacked. Michael had the life Adam wanted, the beautiful wife, the big house, the wealth. But what truly fueled Adam's desire wasn't just the material things. It was the life that Claire led. The way she moved through the world with a quiet elegance, untouched by the struggles that Adam had known. At first their affair had been simple, nothing more than stolen moments, secret rendezvous in places no one would think to look. The excitement of the forbidden was all they needed. But for Adam, that wasn't enough. He didn't want to be just a part of Claire's secret life. He wanted to be the center of it. He wanted her to choose him, to leave Michael behind, and to step into the life that he could offer, one of luxury, power, and control. As weeks bled into months, Adam's desires evolved. He became more possessive, more manipulative. The lines between love and control blurred until there was no longer any distinction. Claire, once so innocent in her affections, began to see the world through Adam's eyes. He painted a picture of a future of what could be if only she would make the ultimate choice. "We could have it all," Adam whispered one night, as they lay in the dark, his breath warm against her skin. His voice was low, almost ominous, like a secret that could no longer be kept. "The house, the money, the freedom." Claire laughed nervously, brushing it off as one of Adam's usual bold, reckless remarks. She didn't want to believe that he was serious, that he was truly capable of wanting more than the affair they were already having. But his words weren't the ramblings of a man lost in his lust, they were calculated and deliberate. Adam wasn't joking. His words planted a seed deep within her mind, and as the days passed, that seed began to sprout, growing roots that wound their way into her thoughts. The more Claire thought about it, the more she began to see Michael for what he was, no longer the loving, supportive husband who had built their life together. In Adam's eyes, Michael was an obstacle, a barrier between them. The more Adam whispered of the life they could have, of the freedom, the wealth, the unrestrained future, the more Claire felt the weight of her marriage dragging her down. The love she had for Michael was still there, somewhere deep inside, but it was clouded by the need for something more, something that only Adam seemed to offer. Their affair, which had started as a guilty pleasure, now felt like a conspiracy, a partnership built on deceit and driven by greed, lust, and ambition. Claire could no longer separate the two men, her husband, the man she had promised to love forever, and Adam, the man who made her feel alive, free, and wanted in ways Michael never had. And so, the plan began to take shape. They would have it all, everything they dreamed of, but it would come at a price. Michael had to be removed. Adam was the mastermind, the one who had come up with the details. He was always thinking, always planning. Claire, at first reluctant, found herself slowly swept into the vision Adam laid out before her. They didn't need to make it messy, didn't need to risk getting caught. It had to be clean and perfect, something that wouldn't raise suspicion. An accident, a fall, that was the answer. They would stage it. It had to look like something that couldn't be avoided, something that anyone would think was just a tragic, unfortunate event. And what better place than the second-floor balcony, the one that Michael had designed himself. It was ironic, poetic even. He'd built the very thing that would be his undoing. Claire couldn't stop thinking about it. The balcony. The edge, Michael unsuspecting, his back turned just long enough for the push that would send him falling. It was clean. It was perfect. And it could be done. In the weeks that followed, they meticulously planned every detail. The timing, the location, the excuses. Every little thing had to be accounted for. They couldn't afford a single mistake. They were walking a razor-thin line, a line that could shatter their lives in an instant. But what was the cost of love, or freedom? What lengths would someone go to for both? If this story has you on edge, if you can feel the tension mounting, the stakes rising with every word, hit like and subscribe to Crime Chronicles for more jaw-dropping tales that reveal how thin the line between love and hate can truly be. Michael wasn't oblivious. He'd always considered himself a perceptive man, someone who could read between the lines and sense when things were off. And recently, everything about Claire had felt off. He'd noticed the subtle changes, the distant stares she would often get when she thought he wasn't looking, the way she seemed so preoccupied, her mind always elsewhere. There were the late-night calls she dismissed too quickly, brushing them off with an offhand excuse about work or a friend she hadn't heard from in a while. And then, there was the faint trace of an unfamiliar cologne clinging to her clothes, something sharp, masculine, nothing he could place. Suspicion gnawed at him in the quiet moments, but he clung to denial, trying to push the thoughts away. After all, love often blinds us to the truth. He wanted to believe Claire was still the woman he had married, the woman who had promised to share everything with him. But with every passing day, his trust in her began to erode, like sand slipping through his fingers. Still, Michael tried to ignore it. He told himself it was all in his head, that maybe he was just being paranoid. He loved Claire, and he didn't want to believe that she was capable of something so cruel. But as the days wore on, the doubts grew harder to shake, the distance between them palpable. Claire had become a stranger, and Michael found himself grasping at the remnants of their once perfect marriage, trying desperately to hold on to what he thought they had. It all changed the day Michael received the anonymous email. At first he thought it was some sort of prank or spam. People could be cruel online, but the subject line stopped him cold. She isn't who you think she is. Check the security footage from last Tuesday. A chill ran down his spine, a knot tightening in his stomach. His immediate reaction was to dismiss it. After all, how could anyone know about the things he'd been feeling? But something deep inside him urged him to look. The curiosity was too strong to ignore. If the email was real, if there was even a shred of truth in it, he needed to know. That night, after Claire had fallen into a restless sleep beside him, Michael quietly slipped out of bed. The house was silent. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. He moved carefully, his heart pounding in his chest as he sat down in front of the computer. His fingers trembled as he opened the email, clicking the link to the security footage. The video footage was grainy, the kind of low-quality image that made it hard to discern details, but Michael's eyes were locked on it, his breath shallow. The footage showed Claire dressed casually in jeans and a hoodie, sneaking out of the house in the dead of night. She was alone at first, walking quickly toward the driveway, but it wasn't long before a shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. The man's face was obscured, but Michael's stomach churned with recognition of the figure's build. It was Adam. He watched frozen as Claire and Adam embraced on the driveway. Their kiss was passionate, urgent, as if the world around them had disappeared. Michael felt his blood run cold. They didn't even notice the blinking red light of the hidden camera, too lost in their secret world to see the evidence that would soon unravel everything. But the betrayal, Michael could have handled that. It was the next clip that shattered his world completely. He had to steady himself, gripping the edge of the desk as he clicked on the second video file. The timestamp showed a few hours later. This time Claire and Adam were in the garage arguing. Their voices were faint, but clear enough to hear their words. "We need to do it soon," Adam hissed, his tone sharp and threatening. "I'm not waiting forever." "I know," Claire whispered back, her voice tight with emotion. "It has to look like an accident." Michael's breath caught in his throat. His heart hammered in his chest as the words echoed in his mind. They weren't just having an affair. They weren't just betraying him emotionally. No, this was something far worse. This wasn't love. This was manipulation, deception. His wife, his Claire, was plotting his murder. And Adam, the man he'd once welcomed into their home, was the orchestrator. The cold reality hit him like a punch to the gut. Everything he'd believed in, the trust, the vows, the years they'd spent together, was a lie. The woman he had married, the woman he thought he knew, was capable of something unspeakable. She was not just unfaithful, she was plotting his death, planning to take everything from him. Tears welled in his eyes, but they were not tears of sorrow, they were tears of disbelief, of a man who had come face to face with the cruelest kind of betrayal. The life he had built, the home they had shared, the love he thought was invincible, had all been nothing more than a facade. And Claire, she had been his greatest enemy all along. Michael sat there, staring at the screen, his mind racing, his heart pounding. What was he supposed to do now? How could he confront her? How could he live in a house with a woman who had planned his death, who had whispered those chilling words in the dark? The answer was simple: he couldn't. Michael could have gone to the police immediately. The evidence was undeniable. The video footage showing Claire and Adam's betrayal, their plans for his murder clear as day. The thought of ending it all, of turning over the proof and watching them both pay for what they'd done, should have been an easy choice, but rage clouded his judgment. His emotions were a tangled mess of disbelief, anger, and pain. He couldn't simply turn them in. He needed to confront them, to see their betrayal with his own eyes, to look into Claire's face and demand to know why she had chosen this path. But more than that, he needed undeniable proof, something that would leave no room for doubt, something that would ensure their lies could never be swept under the rug. So, Michael played the long game. He became the unsuspecting husband, the man who had no idea what his wife and her lover were plotting. Every interaction was carefully calculated. He was affectionate, attentive, just as he had always been. He played his role to perfection, his heart beating with a simmering rage underneath the calm exterior. He even planned a romantic weekend getaway, The kind of thing that would draw Claire and Adam closer, the perfect opportunity for them to execute their plan. He had to make it believable. The more natural they seemed, the better his chance of catching them red-handed. He planted hidden cameras around the house, capturing every glance, every whispered conversation. He left his phone in accidental places, his office, the kitchen counter, even the bathroom, to pick up snippets of their conspiratorial talks. The evidence had to be irrefutable. But there was one final piece to his trap, a move so simple yet brilliant, that it could only have come from a man desperate to see the truth for himself. Michael needed to make sure that when the time came, when Claire and Adam tried to kill him, he would be ready. And so, on the night they had planned, Michael pretended to be drunk. He stumbled around the house, playing the part of the foolish husband who had no idea what was really happening. He slurred his words, leaning heavily on the banister, as he made his way toward the balcony, the one Michael knew would be his death. He was playing the fool, making sure Claire and Adam believed they had him exactly where they wanted him. As he leaned dangerously over the railing, a false sense of vulnerability in his movements, Claire gave Adam a subtle nod. Michael caught it out of the corner of his eye. The signal. This was it. The moment he had been preparing for. Adam, eager and quick, lunged at Michael, his hands grasping for the back of his shirt. The force was violent and sudden, but Michael was ready. A brutal struggle erupted, the sound of shoes scraping against the stone floor, the thud of fists connecting with flesh, the sharp breath of two people locked in a desperate contest for life. Michael fought with the desperation of a man betrayed, a man who had been ripped apart from the inside out by the one person he had trusted most in the world. His love for Claire, once pure, had been twisted into this nightmare, a nightmare where she had plotted to take everything from him, including his life. He was no longer just fighting for his life, he was fighting for justice, for the truth that had been hidden from him for so long. With every ounce of strength he had left, Michael shoved Adam away, sending him stumbling backward, but Adam was relentless, charging again, his hands like iron around Michael's throat. Claire's voice cut through the night air, shrill and panicked. "Adam, stop. What are you doing?" For a moment everything went still. Michael could feel the weight of Claire's words, the betrayal in her voice, and for a brief second, he saw something in her eyes, a flash of regret, of fear perhaps, but it was too late. The moment had passed. Just as Adam lunged once more, trying to finish what he had started, a sudden crash broke through the tension. Hidden officers, who had been tipped off by the evidence Michael had meticulously gathered, stormed the scene. Their weapons were drawn, their voices commanding. "Freeze, hands where we can see them." The chaos of the struggle turned into a whirlwind of flashing lights and shouted orders. Michael's head swam as he watched Adam's expression shift from rage to confusion, then to defeat. He fought, but it was no use. The officers were too many, too strong. Claire screamed, her voice high and panicked, her eyes wide with terror. "No, no, you don't understand. He's lying. But her protests were cut short as Adam was wrestled to the ground, his face twisted with rage and defeat, the fight draining out of him as the weight of the officers pinned him down. Claire stood there, paralyzed, her hands trembling at her sides, her mouth open as though she had lost the ability to form words. Michael took a slow, steady breath, the adrenaline from the fight still pumping through his veins. He had done it. He had caught them. The trap had worked. Adam was taken away, cuffed and dragged into the back of a squad car. Claire was led away, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. The life they had built, the love they had pretended to share, was over. As Michael watched them disappear into the night, he felt a strange sense of emptiness settle over him. Justice had been served, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the end of a dream, the final chapter of a life he would never get back. In the sterile glow of the interrogation room, Claire sat in silence. Her posture was rigid, her hands folded in her lap like a woman awaiting a punishment she knew was inevitable. The soft hum of the fluorescent lights above was the only sound breaking the stillness. Her once charming smile, the one that had always made Michael feel like the most important person in the world, was gone. In its place was something colder, something darker. Her eyes were vacant, devoid of emotion, and yet, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that she was still hiding something, still trying to control the situation in some twisted way. She looked so small now, so fragile in the stark, unforgiving light. But Michael knew better. He had seen the strength behind the facade, the manipulative power that had drawn him in so completely. How could he have been so blind? How could he have loved a woman who had plotted his death, who had been willing to sacrifice him for the life she thought she deserved? Michael watched her from behind the glass, his heart hollow. He could see her face, her rigid features, that once held warmth and affection, now locked in a mask of indifference. A part of him wanted to scream, to shout all the pain and betrayal that was choking him from the inside. But the room was too quiet, too clinical for that. There was no space for raw emotion here. Instead, he sat in silence, his fists clenched at his sides as the weight of everything settled on his shoulders. The trial had been swift. The evidence was overwhelming, too overwhelming for Claire and Adam to deny. The hidden cameras, the emails, the footage of their whispered conversations, and the text messages exchanged in the days leading up to the planned murder. It was all laid bare for the world to see. The truth was inescapable. Their love story, once so filled with passion and secrecy, had been exposed as nothing more than a tale of greed, manipulation, and betrayal. The courtroom had been suffocating, filled with hushed whispers and gasps as the full extent of their plot was revealed. Claire had sat there, unmoving, as the prosecutor read off the charges: attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and a dozen other offenses tied to their scheme. She didn't flinch as the evidence mounted against her. She had said nothing in her defense, her silence louder than any words could have been. The only time her composure faltered was when she caught Michael's gaze across the room. For a fleeting moment, there was a flicker of something, remorse maybe, or fear, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. In the end, Claire and Adam were convicted, their fates sealed by their own actions. As the gavel came down, Michael felt an odd mixture of relief and emptiness wash over him. It was over. They were going to pay for what they'd done. But even as the courtroom erupted in murmurs, as Claire was led away in handcuffs, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that something inside him had broken, irreparably shattered by the woman he had once loved with all his heart. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal paperwork, media coverage, and whispered conversations. Michael became something of a local hero, the man who had survived an almost certain death at the hands of the person he trusted most. People congratulated him, told him how brave he was, how strong. But Michael didn't feel brave. He didn't feel strong. He felt lost, adrift in a sea of emotions he couldn't begin to process. He had survived, yes, but the scars ran deeper than any physical wound. Every time he closed his eyes, the memories would flood back. The moments of tenderness, the late-night talks, the quiet gestures of affection. Everything he had believed in felt like a lie now. The woman who had promised to love him forever, to grow old with him, had been the one sharpening the knife behind his back all along. Michael found himself staring at the balcony more often than he would have liked. The place where his life had nearly ended. He would stand there for hours, his hands gripping the railing, the cold metal digging into his skin as if to remind him that he had lived to see another day. The memories of that night, of the struggle, of the look in Claire's eyes as she betrayed him, haunted him. He had survived the physical threat, but what about the emotional wreckage? The aftermath of the betrayal was something he wasn't sure he could ever fully escape. In the quiet moments, when the noise of the world faded away, Michael found himself questioning everything. Had their love ever been real? Had he been so blinded by his own emotions that he failed to see the darkness lurking beneath the surface? The woman he had once given his heart to had become a stranger, a cruel, calculating stranger who had nearly taken everything from him. But even in the midst of the pain, Michael knew one thing for certain: he had survived. He had fought for his life, for his truth, and he had won. Claire and Adam would pay for their betrayal, and Michael would rebuild his life, piece by painful piece. It wouldn't be easy. There would be days when the weight of the past would threaten to crush him. There would be moments when he wondered if he could ever trust again. But he would carry on, because sometimes, survival isn't just about escaping danger, It's about reclaiming the pieces of yourself that were lost in the process. And as Michael looked out at the balcony once more, he finally understood the lesson, because sometimes, the person you trust the most is the one sharpening the knife behind your back. If this story sent shivers down your spine, hit the subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments. How well do we truly know the people closest to us? Stay tuned for more real-life tales, where love turns lethal.